My name is Max Lerner, him. I am the Executive Director of GROW Externships, and I'll be the moderator for this discussion. I'm really thrilled. This is so part and parcel to our organization. This panel explaining diversity and inclusion within the sciences, which takes so many different forms, is really at the heart of GROW Externships, which, to give just a bit there, is a program developed with the goal of helping developing professionals get experience in the field, get paid experience, get context, get to work with practitioners all over the world, and to really bootstrap their careers. There's a lot of amazing people that are thrilled about this field. There's a lot of talent attrition because it's hard to get invested and involved in such a new field. And dually, not only are we trying to aid people that are coming up in their professionalism, but we're trying to diversify the spectrum of people that are getting in that. We really want to make sure, and this is at the heart of this discussion, that as we find new ways to steward, and oftentimes just leaning on former ways that we're just rediscovering now to steward the land, that we want to do so in a diverse and representative way. It's all our planet, and if we are to truly address the challenges of climate change, address the challenges of modern sustainability and resiliency, we need to have a representative group of experts and people to create a social science space that's representative of society.
My name is Mary Pearl, she, hers, my pronouns. I have had a long career as a wildlife conservationist. I did my dissertation research on the social behavior of Himalayan rhesus monkeys, and I lived for 2 years round the year following monkeys, sort of doing the Jane Goodall thing, but rhesus monkeys. But one of the things I noticed was well, I'll tell you more later when I introduce my topic, but I live very close to the land and became acutely aware of what was at risk. Since then, I have worked as a wildlife conservationist, first at World Wildlife Fund, and then I was at the Wildlife Conservation Society, and then I ran my own organization, now known as Eco Health Alliance, before it was Wildlife Trust, where we built careers of local scientists all around the world in conservation biology. And we also examine the relationship between environmental change and disease emergence. And I hate to say we saw it coming, but we did. We saw this coming 20 years ago, the pandemic, and we're just gotten over, you know, this is going to be a feature of our future, unfortunately, just as with climate change, and disease emergence are inextricably combined as well. And as we'll find out from our discussions, this affects people differently around the world. And my most recent career, I moved from managing wildlife conservation research organizations to higher ed, particularly public higher ed. And my most recent gig was as Dean of Macaulay Honors College of the City University of New York, which to my great pleasure is a highly diverse institution where we affect transformations of really brilliant people from every sector of our community here in New York. So GROW, just as soon as I heard about it from a Macaulay grad, Janet, I thought this is the kind of organization that really has a positive role to play. So thank you.
My name is Kiana Mickey. I'm a food systems and equity consultant. I have in recent years started a nonprofit that is built to operation or help groups, nonprofits, community leaders, and farmers to operationalize equity, to make better, stronger, resilient, and equitable connections to their food systems, to business. I have a background in solidarity economy. So there's work that I've done on the city level, state, federal, and oftentimes international level around food and farm policy, but not just to be a wonk. I'm not a policy wonk, so I hope people aren't disappointed, but really trying to find ways to take what, you know, the policies that really govern our lives, the food we eat, our neighborhoods, our ecosystems, and trying to find ways to amplify folks on the ground, amplify lived experiences, traumas, and equities, and finding ways to divest from that and make it feasible, make it sustainable, and make it authentic. I feel like that's what I try to bring to the work that I do. Some folks know me from my time at Just Food. So over the years, I went from being a volunteer at Just Food. There's a couple of steps that we'll probably connect. I'll try to weave later, but I eventually started running the nonprofit. So I did that for 3 years, and I turned the nonprofit along with our partners to really make it from what it had been. It was a historically white-led food justice or food security nonprofit, and really try to turn it into what it should be, which is like a community-driven model of and by the people. So when I left it with good stewards that are community gardeners, CSA leaders, and policy and change makers.
Aloha mai kākou apau e ku'u māhua. My name is Manu Aluli Meyer, and it's a pleasure to meet you. Aloha mai. Let me see what I do here in Hawaii. I was a professor, now as a philosopher practitioner. Now I'm into cultural agroforestry. And we have 8 acres up here in the secluded Oahu, where Max and the gang came a couple of times, and they really worked hard. And it's an honor to be here. Now I work in cultural peacemaking practices called Ho'oponopono. It's a different type of Ho'oponopono that's not traveling around the world. It's an old version of what is traveling around the world, but it's an honor to be here. And I look forward to listening to hearing what you folks have to say.
I suppose something that I put to the panelists, existing within the broad spectrum of the sciences, what challenges do you find in sort of, we have this vision for diversity and inclusion within the environmental sciences and bringing more people into the space. Where do you find challenges achieving that goal within your professional disciplines?
I'll tell you a story. When I was 13 years old in New York, I was really good at science, and Columbia University announced that it was going to have an enrichment program on Saturday mornings for kids who are interested in science in high school. I asked my 8th grade science teacher, Mr. Eaton, if he would write a recommendation. And his answer was, well, Mary, I would, but you'd be taking the place of a boy who has a real chance of being a scientist. And the sad part was, I was 13. I didn't know. I didn't know of any, Jane Goodall wasn't famous. There was, so I just sort of thought, oh, and it wasn't until I got to college that I found my way back to science. That's a very extreme, to show you how far we've come. I mean, that was in the 60s. And there's still that going on. I mean, even in my work, the New York Zoological Society, I'd often be the only woman in the room, and it was tough. And I was in the first class of women at Yale, and there were professors who would say we didn't belong. So I got it straight. I didn't even get it subtle, And I think that for some people it's crushing. By the time it was still hitting me in college, I thought, damn, I'm just going to use this anger as fuel for my own advancement. And then I went on to grad school, and so it's very personal for me.
I mean, what I see now in working with folks that are either coming into farming or coming into agriculture or coming into food, even food sciences, how many folks, no matter if you grew up here in New York or in other parts of the country, how many folks have been systemically kept from quality education, quality access to equipment, and the encouragement to see like that could be. So, I think it impacts us on a gender level for sure, and disproportionately, folks of color and communities of color, I think get compounded by that. And it's ironic because like my mom went to college, she had a biology degree, and she talked about wanting to be a scientist, for a career, but that's not where she ended up. And I think it's often that, like, not having the opportunities to take what's your passion to become what's your career, or even have a space in academia. And I think, over time, there's a lot of times parents need to do well, and they encourage us to take different courses or, think about different careers. and we're not really, informed or told or thought or have access to or exposure to certain academic sciences, environmental sciences, or even just something as scientific as agriculture. And so for folks to try to find a way back, just think about all the years that you've been divested from that and all that's been taken. But, I also see how excited or how people bring back the practices of Indigenous ways to what they're doing now. And I would say on the other parts of my work too is sometimes people think about equity, whether it's racial equity or environmental equity or economic equity at the end. They're not really trying to find ways to connect it to the source. Or they say like those issues are too big to solve or we can't do that. So it ends up being the answer, which will then always be perpetrated. And so what you end up having is like what ends up being more performative actions. For me, it's the disconnect between supporting and nurturing folks in those early developmental stages, where those actual connections are so critical, but then seen at the contemporary times when we then say like, well, now we want to incorporate diversity, but you almost are, then it ends up still being performative because one, we're not addressing the root of getting folks in, but then we're also sometimes not doing the homework to find folks that maybe didn't get a chance to get the degree, but have that experience. It's not just short-term touch points of trainings or opportunities. I think that can open a door or be a fuse or a spark. But what I really like about the GROW Externships is the ability to have ongoing connections, ongoing relationships, ongoing experiences. I think that's really what helps folks connect the dots. Not just, I went to one program and they did it for like one day, like, this is a program that gives really, you get practical experience, relationships, but then you get to be on the land, but also you get to build partnerships and collaboration. That's so important.
I think that's the key. Absolutely. I come from a completely different space, gang. We absolutely, my job is to reframe the whole kit and caboodle. As a philosopher practitioner, we do not want to belong to this youthful society of America. So I think Krishnamurti is my favorite philosopher. It summarizes it so well when he said it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So what I get from this is that all Indigenous means we in Hawaii have been colonized and now we're occupied by the Americans. And we're at a different place now where we're very clear about the disease that's hit us. And we've named it historical and cultural trauma. But the issue is the thinking and how Americans frame the issue. The ongoing pilina, we call it mo'o. The mo'o is the concept of continuity. That's all Indigenous epistemology means, is continuity. Continuity, continuity, continuity. If you do not have continuity, you do have these flash in the pans and there's no relationality. So the number one issue, the number one currency for continuity is relationality. And that is through friendships, and that is through experiences, and that is through trusting. I'm telling you, it's radical collaboration, or everyone goes or nobody goes. But diversity for us is about healing. It's not about putting, a brown face in a white room. It's not about race. It's not about race. It's not even about gender. It's about the essence of what continuity means in our systems. And that means reframing how we see the issue. Because I don't want equity. Forget it. I don't want Hawaiians oppressing Hawaiians because they got PhDs. I thought I did, because I went to Aotearoa to be with Linda Smith, and she had 500 Māoris with 500 PhDs in 5 years, and that did not help them. So it's not higher education. The higher education systems in America, I think, are collapsing with irrelevance and with not seeing the they're still silos. So transdisciplinary, I love the solidarity economics, absolutely, absolutely key. We call it sharing. Because they always say the Hawaiians bartered. We're like, no, we never bartered. We shared. Okay, all right, you guys. There's a difference. So unless you are unless you have that frequency, that currency of exchange, that is of pilina, of relationality, you will not know what I'm talking about. Well, first of all, science needs to change, but what I've just pivoted as a professor for 30 years. When you step out of the university, but I'm still in it, my job is to indigenize the university. And I always tell people it'll happen next week, Tuesday by 3. You know what I mean? So what that means for me is connection to community and awareness of the needs of community. And you could summarize science in a process called Hilo or kilohana, the idea of a type of quality of empirical awareness. Kilo is to see. To see for us is Ike. Ike is to see. Ike also is the word for knowledge, and Ike means to be given revelation. So we see knowledge as a hologram. The idea that there is a dimensionality to knowledge production. It's not only mundane empirical rationalism, but a regenerative logic that includes the needs of community, the currency of relationality, blah, blah, blah. I can go on. So this is a time to redefine sciences. And as women, we can't just want to fit in. And as people of diversity, because they try to teach us that, what did they say in the 70s and 80s? Oh yeah, tolerate diversity. Like what a low bar, really? Tolerate diversity? Difference is what we have in common in Hawaii. So we're at a totally different ballpark around American thinking of diversity, because America is basically black and white. And then, the little peppering in between. But here in Hawaii, look at me. I'm Hawaiian. You know what I mean? My father is from Belleville, Illinois. I'm the whitest Hawaiian I know. But I am, my kupuna and my roots are deep, and my purpose, if you could summarize Hawaiian epistemology is in 2 sentences, it's simple. And if you can summarize our science, the genesis of our science is love land, serve people. Or wait, it's love people, serve land. That's the hologram. Ta-da, bump it up.
Knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Yes, in my experience, American and Western European academics tend to stay in their lane. They think that they can't borrow from a philosopher, as you saw her do so easily. They can't, whereas in Latin America, in India, in Southeast Asia, you'll find that academics, even if they're in one discipline, they'll borrow from another. It's a big challenge, as you say, from the get-go, to start reframing issues that bring values and wisdom into the practice of science, because the values are there. They're just really attenuated values that are the ones that are in too much of American science. The last in-person climate change conference, well, let's see, back in COP2, that's a conference of the parties. I think I told you when we were having a phone call in 2001, the ratio of male to female professionals deciding on forestry and energy projects was 11-1. At the last in-person climate change conference in Madrid, 60% of the government delegates and 73% of the heads and deputy heads of delegations were men. Now, I have to remember that in the rural countryside, up to 90% of the food is produced and the resources are collected by women. And there has to be a better match between the lived experience of people coping with climate change and the people who are making decisions for them.
There's so much that we could be learning from that are rooted in Indigenous practices and Indigenous ways. And instead of just saying like, let's opt out of that, let's stay with our colonized mind and our colonized practices and our businesses. But if we're finding our jobs, our opportunities, and weaving those things together, that's what's going to help us survive. If those practices helped communities survive for thousands of years, and yet we're living in this really small time or with row crop, farming and other, like scientific innovations where some have been great and some haven't. Like, it's interesting, when you take a step back to be like, well, how could there be communities that lived or thrived for thousands of years under oppression, under adversity, under different forms of climate issues and struggles, human and otherwise, and yet still are here and we're bringing these practices back. And yet we've lived in, a relatively short amount of time since the introduction of pesticides and such, and we're dying, we're struggling, we're not going to survive this way. We need to really be reclaiming the sciences and bridging what we know in science and what we know to be true if we want to survive whatever is ahead of us, because what we've done in these last 50, 60, 70 years is clearly killing us. And capitalism ain't gonna save us.
But that is my fondest dream, is to create spaces where everybody brings what they do best to environmental conservation with love, appreciation, respect.
It really is this finding that way to continue to make those real connections. And how do we balance the structures that we are forced to live in and building and supporting alternative models and approaches, and understanding the systems that we're working on or working to dismantle or work within in order to survive and to thrive. And I think that's like the way forward. But it's how we bring that authentic self together is if we have that collective power. When we talk about solidarity economy or solidarity movements, it's what we bring to the table, our whole selves, our authentic selves, the privilege, the disconnect, all of that experience. If we can really build a place to honor that, then we can tackle the systemic. If we think one person's going to do it, it's not. If we think just a small group of folks, we've seen that, it's not. But if we all start to see ourselves as bringing our whole experiences to that, then we'll be able to tackle.
I'm gonna put it in the chat, everybody, so that we can all learn something very simple together. Uluae, uluae, ke velina, a ke aloha. We believe that aloha is the primal source of our collective regeneration. So, it's all this fancy dancing work with the Hawaiian epistemology and indigenous epistemology that developed into holographic epistemology. It just boils down to love. That love is our true intelligence. So this is a short chant that we can all learn together. So we're gonna, every time we say that love is the practice of an awake mind, that's what it means. Loving is the practice of an awake mind. Time to love. Let's awaken ourselves, okay? And Max and Joan, mahalo nui no ko ike nahe nahe. Thank you so much. I look forward to continually working with you folks, because you ready? Here we go. Uluae ke velina a ke aloha. Uluae ke velina a ke